Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. A naval standoff last month in the Mediterranean Sea has brought relations between Turkey and France to dangerous new lows. Already at odds over a series of issues, the NATO allies have also found themselves on opposite sides in the Libyan war. France has accused Turkey of defying an arms embargo and targeting a French naval ship. Turkey has rejected those accusations and has blasted France for turning a blind eye to atrocities committed by warlord Khalifa Haftar and the flow of weapons to his militias from Egypt and the United Arab Emirates. Haydar Abbasi tells us more.
The warlord's power is on the wane. Libya's Khalifa Haftar is in retreat after a series of military defeats. His rebel forces have lost significant territory in recent weeks. This has been the story of Libya for nearly a decade. Near constant fighting has devastated the North African nation. As if that weren't enough, the conflict is at risk of turning into a proxy war, as several world powers are supporting opposing sides. Two of those powers are France and Turkey. Turkey backs the UN-recognized Government of National Accord, or GNA, led by Prime Minister Francois Burgat. He's based in Tripoli. And France is seen as supporting the warlord Khalifa Haftar. He controls the rival parliament known as the House of Representatives, which sits in the eastern city of Tobruk. Haftar is also backed by Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Russian mercenaries. Since April last year, he's been trying to capture Tripoli. But Turkish military power has helped to turn the tide against him. Not everyone's pleased with the result. On the face of it, France and Turkey are on the same side. They're both members of the NATO military alliance. But recently, that friendship has become strained. Last month, Paris accused Turkey's navy of failing to submit to an inspection by a French warship in the Mediterranean. France said it suspected a Turkish vessel of smuggling weapons into Libya, violating a UN arms embargo. But Ankara has rejected the allegations.
Macron'un yönettiği veya yönetemediği şu anda Fransa.
France is in Libya now only for its own interests and ambitions, with a destructive understanding as it destabilized all of Africa in the past with a colonial approach and bombed and left Libya in 2011. Therefore, the attitude and policies of France, and especially Macron, must be questioned and criticized. First of all, they should be honest and transparent. Then they criticize Turkey. Macron has seen that attacking Turkey does not work in terms of domestic policy.
Turkey and Libya agreed to a security deal in November, allowing Ankara to supply the GNA with weapons. Paris insists it's neutral in the conflict and supports peace. But there's evidence of French support for the warlord Haftar, dating back at least 5 years. Anti-tank missiles bought by France from the United States had been found in the hands of Haftar's fighters. And in 2016, a French military helicopter was shot down in Libya, killing 3 French soldiers. So why is France supporting a warlord? It seems Macron is eager to secure lucrative energy deals with Libya. The country has the largest oil reserves in Africa, around 48 billion barrels. And at the moment, that oil is controlled by Haftar and his militias. So how far is Macron willing to go to get that oil? And is he willing to jeopardize relations with a NATO ally? Haydar Abbasi, Straight Talk.
And joining me now from Ankara is Bilgehan Ozturk, who is a researcher at the SETA Research Center. And from Aix-en-Provence, I have Francois Burgat, who is the member of the European Council on Foreign Relations. So, gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. So, Francois, walk us through the current lows in relations between Turkey and France. We know that France pulled out of a NATO mission, and back and forth rhetoric on Libya is heating up. So how bad could things get between Turkey and France?
Well, allow me first to go back to what I consider are the roots, the guiding lines, the profound motivation of France in Libya. There are 2 of them. one is well known, the other one is less well known. The first one is a commercial, profitable relation between France and the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. France sells military equipment, those famous Rafale, for instance, to Egypt. So this is a comfortable commercial relation. This is well known. The other side is not so well known. The other side of this alliance, almost blind alliance of France with the strategy of the Emirates, and this of course will bring us in Libya, is the fact that France sells equipment to the Emirates, but France buys their narrative on the political dynamics, both domestic and regional. And the Emirate, Egyptian, Saudi narrative when it comes to domestic and regional political development is this kind of obsessional blaming of what they label political Islam. So when France supports the Emirates, supports Haftar, supports Egypt in Libya, basically they go along this very fruitful commercial relation, but they also instrumentalize this discourse of demonizing whatever you put under the label of political Islam, and it's a very wide angle in France. Macron has been blaming on behalf of Turkey what he has been exactly the same kind of foreign interferences that he has been fully blindly supported on the side of the Emirates, of Egypt, and in Russia. This is the situation.
Okay, so we know that relations between Turkey and France haven't been good for years. I just want to go through some of the most public disputes the two country leaders or officials have had. So relations started to worsen after the failed July 15th coup in 2016. Just a few days after, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan hits back at France's foreign minister, who criticized Turkey's post-coup arrests. When it came to Turkey's EU accession on January the 5th, 2018, French President Macron tells President Erdogan that there is no chance Turkey is joining the European Union. Tensions also flared over Syria on January the 31st of last year. Turkey's foreign ministry rejects resolutions by the French Senate and National Assembly over its Operation Peace Spring to root out terrorists in northern Syria. And then, just a week after, Turkish presidential spokesperson Ibrahim Kalin condemns Macron for using the Armenian issue to deflect from his own domestic problems and to politicize history. And to start of this year, on January the 29th, France sends warships to eastern Mediterranean to support Greece in its standoff with Turkey over regional energy reserves. So, Bilgehan, it's been a few rocky years. What's next for these two NATO allies?
Well, based on the past experience, as you summed very well, the series of events and the spat between the two countries, it feels like it's going to worse from this point, because no convergence, especially in Libya and especially in Eastern Mediterranean, which are the most crucial issues between the two countries at the moment, seem to be promising in the way of convergence. So Macron is quite escalatory in his discourse towards Turkey. He's blaming in an increasing intensity because of the role of Turkey in Libya. So based on the tendency and the dynamics unfolding at the moment, it seems like it's going to worse from here, not for the better.
So how conflicting it is for France to side with Haftar, Francois, who is strongly backed by Russia, a NATO adversary, and the UAE, as well as Saudi Kingdom and Egypt, whose leaders are quite controversial. How does it fit in France's alliances, memberships with the international organizations?
Yeah, you mentioned Russia, and this is the, if not dark, the obscure area of this connection of France with this wide range of allies in the region, because basically Haftar was supported by the US for many reasons, because the US support Mohammed bin Salman and the Mohammed bin Ziyad, the Emirate and the Saudi leadership. They support Sisi. And Haftar is a good old friend of CIA until since 1987, when he has been their ally in struggling against Gaddafi. But the fact that the Russians have moved in has made the US change their mind. They are not ready to accept the idea that they should be completely expelled of a diplomatic solution in this part of the world. So I would say the most difficult now side of this broad French alliance is the fact that Wagner, let's say Putin, has moved in,
yes,
which makes things a little more complicated.
So, Bilgehan, there seems to be a personal animosity between President Erdogan and President Macron. Why Macron is so adamant in confronting Turkey, just because it doesn't have a clear strategy on Libya lately?
It has a quite personal dimension, as you mentioned, because when I compare Macron's stance towards Libya, I see a serious difference between Macron's attitude and his predecessor, Francois Hollande. During the Francois Hollande presidency, the French foreign policy towards Libya was not adamantly pro-Haftar. But Macron is much more outspoken when it comes to supporting Haftar and also criticizing Turkey. It is because of Macron's personal leanings, and also because of the choice of Macron simply following the footsteps of United Arab Emirates when it comes to the Middle East and especially in Libya. When we look at the policies of these countries, basically there's a convergence between United Arab Emirates and France, but this is a very obsessive and ideological policy rather than a rational one. Since Macron is also adopting this ideological and obsessive stance towards Libya and Turkey, that is a source of friction between Turkey and the Macron.
Yeah. So mass graves were discovered in a territory liberated from Haftar's militias, and Javelin anti-tank missiles sold to France turned up at Haftar's militias. Francois, what do you make of it? Is Macron trying to distract attention from a possible French culpability, or is he trying to deflect from his domestic policy problems? What's your take on that?
Well, I would most probably come back to my first response. Macron is using the anti-Erdogan public opinion attitude due to the fact that Erdogan is considered more or less as someone who's been created by the rise of political Islam in the area. The main source of electoral resources in France, as I said, is blaming the green as the color of Islam. So this is part of the landscape. I'm deeply convinced that the national French anthem no longer goes by the words of the Marseillaise, it goes by demonizing the separatists, and more or less, Turkey's regime is considered as being part of the alliance of the resources of political Islam. I would put it this way.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we're out of time. We have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. 3 years ago, news broke that the Saudi royal family would have a new heir to the throne. In a shocking video, then Crown Prince Mohammed bin Nayef was seen accepting that his title would pass to the king's son, Mohammed bin Salman. The young prince, then just 31, has since led his country down a troubling path. He has overseen confrontation with the country's neighbors, a disastrous war in Yemen, and the brutal assassination of dissident Jamal Khashoggi that has tarnished his carefully crafted image. But who is MBS, as he is known in most of the world? What is the driving force behind his governing style? Let's take a look at this report. Let's bring in our guests. Joining us from London is Ghanem al Dosari. He is a Saudi human rights activist and political satirist. And Andreas Krieg, a lecturer at the School of Security Studies at King's College in London. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler, MBS, has continued to dominate the news headlines in recent weeks following reports of crackdown against royals, officials and dissidents abroad. So our guest, Ghanem al Dosari, is not the only exiled dissident allegedly under threat by the Saudi government. One dissident based in Canada is Omar Abdulaziz, a 26-year-old Saudi vlogger and political activist who had close ties to murdered Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Abdulaziz says he recently received a warning by Canadian authorities that he, too, could be a potential target of the Saudi royal family. Canadian intelligence said it also has evidence to suggest that Abdulaziz's phone was hacked in the lead-up to Khashoggi's murder when the two men were in regular contact. In a recent video on Twitter, the activist said Mohammad bin Salman and his people want to harm me. They want to do something against me, but I don't know if it is an assassination or a kidnapping. I don't know, but it's something that is definitely not right. So, Ghanem, can you speak on the dangers of being a Saudi dissident abroad?
Well, anyone will speak up against the Saudi regime will become a target. We recently heard about Omar the threat to his safety. I was threatened before him, and Jamal was targeted and killed in Saudi consulate in Turkey. So this is not something new that the Saudi government will target anyone who speak up against them. But the only thing is different is how far are they willing to go? Because previously we haven't heard that they committed this heinous crimes in European or soil or in America or somewhere else. But right now, under MBS leadership, I think they are willing to do anything to anyone who speak up his mind.
Are you worried that he'll come after you, for example, in London?
Well, I've been under police protection for almost 2 years and a half right now. And the threat, I could only assume it's coming from Saudi Arabia. So, of course, everyone speak up their mind against MBS. Should be worried and should be looking after over their shoulders.
All right. So, Andreas, why the MBS is tightening his grip on his opponents? To which extent these people pose a threat to his rule? Are they too dangerous?
No, I mean, we have to understand that Saudi is in an immense crisis at the moment. Most importantly, the COVID-19 has hit the Saudi kingdom worse than any other Gulf state. So economically, the crisis is a lot worse than we initially thought. It comes on top of an existing oil price crisis that puts a lot of strain on the kingdom. And amidst all of that, MBS was actually trying for a long time to set everything straight for his political transition. We were expecting a political transition in the kingdom to happen over Ramadan or this summer before the G20 summit. So there's a lot of pressure internally. And obviously that political transition is something that comes at a time when in the Allegiance Council and within the wider royal family, MBS's position is not entirely clear and tolerated. So there's still a lot of opposition towards him. And obviously, internally in Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of discourse about him, which is negative, at least in private and other circles. So,
I was going to ask us, how would his rule be impacted if the MBS continued to sideline his traditional partners or lost all the support by the tribal leaders? Can he survive, and why is he sidelining those traditional components of this kingdom?
Yes, this is the very first time that, Saudi has never been a democracy and has always been somewhat autocratic, but there has been power sharing within the family. And this has now been somewhat sidelined for the last 2 years at least. And obviously the pressure is on. Loads of those people who oppose his lineage and the lineage of Salman have now been sidelined. People affiliated with them, even overseas, have been sidelined. The families have been pressured. So that kind of shows us there is a lot of internal pressure on him and a lot of phobia and paranoia that people might not stick with him and might potentially make a move if King Salman actually dies, because it's very important to highlight the king is very important.
Yeah, despite his ailing health, experts argue that the king still has some sort of control over his son, and he is the one who keeps this kingdom relatively peaceful and intact. So Ghanem, what happens when the king dies? What's next for the kingdom, and for how much longer can King Salman shield his son?
Well, as long as King Salman is alive, MBS will be fine. But when he dies, and we know that he's a very old man and he could die any moment, when he dies, I think there will be a war between the royal family themselves. Each one wanted to assume power, and I don't think MBS will survive after his father's death. Let's not forget that MBS himself right now is not welcomed in the Western world after he killed Jamal Khashoggi, and we saw the statement, that the report that came from CIA that he's involved in his killing, which we all know. Then he's not welcomed, and if he doesn't have international support and he loses his father, I think he will end up in prison or being. Yeah.
Andreas, you've just mentioned the economic difficulties the kingdom has been facing, both from the coronavirus and the contraction of oil prices. So he has promised employment, growing private sector, and foreign investment. Do you believe that he'll be able to deliver on his promises? And how will this Vision 2030 play out, in your opinion?
Well, I think he has delivered on something. So in terms of social liberalization, some things have moved in the right direction, and that needs to be acknowledged. However, as a leader, he is very impulsive. He has a lack of strategic foresight. He has invested loads of money, mostly overseas, not internally, which obviously helps the Saudi wealth fund, but it doesn't help the domestic economy. Most analysts are very, very pessimistic when they look at Agenda 2030 as something that can actually be realized, considering that the direct foreign investment in Saudi Arabia is at an absolute low, has been for a while. None of the targets that were set were actually met. The idea of setting up a new city, Neom, is also something that has not been realizable. Much of it has been put on hold because of the oil price crisis. So macroeconomically, Saudi is in a very, very dire situation. Privatization is obviously hampered by the fact as well that the Saudi government will tighten its belt and will not continue spending in investing in the domestic economy. So what most analysts are saying now is let the sovereign wealth fund invest domestically rather than abroad, rather than investing in companies in India, China, or into football clubs in the United Kingdom, for example. Let them invest domestically to actually boost the economy. That has not happened.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you for joining us on Straight Talk. I appreciate it a lot. Thank you. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberker. If you've got any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with the hashtag Straight Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.